Hello friends, uh, in the current unit today we are going to talk about database. We have up till now talked about the file management system and we have compared it to the database system. We found out that database systems are generally superior. We also talked about what data is. Now we will be moving on to what database is. Now database is an organized collection, repository of data. So database is where we store all the data, right? So this is basically a collection of data, and there are different types of database. Some are called commercial database, the other ones are called the non-commercial database, right? The non-commercial database are also known by the name personal database. So the term personal database is used to denote the non-commercial databases, right? Now what is the difference between the two? Now let's have a look at the commercial database. They are basically used for commercial purpose. They are basically used to generate profit. For example, many companies keep data of their buyers, their customers. For example, companies which sell automobiles, they keep a data of their buyers, and once 5 or 6 years have elapsed after the customer has bought a particular car, they would contact him again so that he could be sold the upgraded version, or he could be sold a higher model. So this is an example of how commercial database are used by companies to generate more profit. Again, you can call up the current customers to sell them some car accessories also by making use of this data. Many a times the telecom companies will collect your data, and depending on your usage profile, they would provide you the option to upgrade to a different plan. So this is how basically commercial database is made use of, used by business firms. Commercial database, as I said, for example, customer database, I have taken up this example. Many a times Facebook is known for creating the whole profile, constructing the whole profile of the Facebook user just by collecting data regarding his usage habits and his usage frequency, and the other browsing habits, like what does he comment, whether he makes any comment or not, what kind of news items does he click through, and what kind of news items does he ignore. So all these things help Facebook, all this data help Facebook actually construct a profile of the customer, of the user, and this they can use to further they monetize this particular customer profile by selling it to the companies which want to sell their products. So for example, if a particular customer profile has shown that the person is planning to buy a car, they would sell this particular information to a car manufacturer or to a car marketer, and then the car marketer would show his ad directly on the Facebook page of the particular customer, of the particular user. So this is how Facebook actually monetizes its database of customers, and uses it to earn and generate profit. And that is why we can say that though they are providing us services for free, but actually it is not free, because they are actually collecting our data and then making commercial use of that data, right? So this is one example of how commercial database is made use of. Then we have got the non-commercial database, or the personal database, wherein the database is not being used for any commercial purpose. Now let's think of the data that you collect when you are conducting your researches. So maybe you are conducting researches with, let's say, 50-100 respondents, and then you collect the data, and then you are able to find out whether a particular customer is satisfied or not with the product or not. For example, let's say this has been the topic of your research. Now you have collected this data not for any commercial purpose but for academic purpose. So this could be an example of a non-commercial database. So it is used for personal use. Many a times it is used by the researchers. So it is basically research data. Now what are the attributes of an ideal database? Let's have a look at them. The characteristics of an ideal database: it should be able to store large amount of data, right? Large amount of data. And then the database should allow easy updation, because the data would not remain stagnant. It would not remain static. It would keep on changing dynamically. So, for example, today, if I talked about, let's say, the data which is collected, the database which is maintained by the Facebook. Now, naturally, the database will keep on getting updated with every single use of the Facebook user. So with every single time the Facebook user actually browses the Facebook website, or he logs into the Facebook website, every single time more data is getting generated, and this has to be added to the earlier existing data about the user. So the database will keep getting updated on a very frequent basis, and that is why it is very important for the database to allow easy updation. And again, retrieval should be quick, very fast. Retrieval is when you are trying to cull out some information from the database. So you are basically processing the data which is there in the database, and you are trying to cull out, extract some information. So that also should be very, very easy, because if you are not able to extract any information from the database, then that database is almost of no use, right? So the extraction, the data retrieval should be, the information retrieval should be very, very quick, right? Let's now talk about the users of the database system. Who are the ones who actually use database systems? So the first kind of users are known as the database administrators. They are known as administrator because they basically administer the whole database, right? They plan what the database would look like, then they design it according to the plan, then they basically prepare the design of the database, and then they create the database and then maintain the database also. So they are known as database administrators. They also design access control procedures. Who all, I think we have discussed access control earlier also, who all can access the data, and what would be the process, what would be the procedure to be followed to access the data. For example, you may have to log in, and you may have to probably log in with a particular user ID given to you. So you'll have to log in using that particular ID, and then you will probably have to supply your password. Or we can also go for access control based on biometrics. So for example, which happens in so many bank branches nowadays, if the cashier wants to log in into his account to perform some banking operation, then what will he be doing? He will first of all be providing his biometrics to a machine which is basically scanning the fingerprints. So he will be providing the fingerprints, and depending on whether the machine is able to match this fingerprint with the earlier record, this person will be allowed to access the system and allowed to access the account and perform the various banking operations. So this is how you basically have different kinds of access control procedures, and these procedures are basically designed by the database administrator, and he's doing this to keep the data secure from unauthorized access. Otherwise, everybody, any Tom, Dick and Harry can modify the database and can enter some wrong piece of information, some wrong piece of data in the database, which ultimately will result in inaccurate information. So the database administrator will do what? That individual will do what? He will keep database secure from such unauthorized accesses, right? Then the application programmers. Now what do these people do? Now this is again a different set of people. However, they also, just like database administrators, they also are people with software skills and programming skills. And what do? They basically write application programs to manipulate the data in the database. So they write application programs so that they can make use of the data in the database and obtain some desired results, right? So basically they are designing these programs, application programs, so that the data in the database could actually be converted into information, right? So these kind of people are known as application programmers, and as I said already, these people are again people who have considerable knowledge of programming, right? Just like the database administrators. Now we have the third category, which in fact is the most important category, because ultimately you are if you are designing a database, or if you are trying to keep it secure from unauthorized access, you ultimately are doing it so that the end users can use this database, right? So the end users are going to be the most important user segment of database systems. And what do the end users do? They enter the data and update the data in the database. Again, they will be provided access by the database administrator. So the database administrator is not going to make any modification in the data. No, he is not going to make any modification in the data or the database. That is not his job. He is only going to plan and design and then actually create and maintain the database, and also to allow access to certain users to this particular database. But the data would be ultimately entered by end users, so updation would be done by the end users. Now for example, let's talk about the database which we have in our banks. The database administrator is there, which will be creating and maintaining this kind of a database. However, who would be the end user? It would be the cashier, who is sitting at the cash window and he is dispersing money or he is collecting deposits. He'll have to actually enter that data into the database. So procedures are there. He'll first log into his account and then he'll fill in the data in the database, and this way the database will get updated. So if you have withdrawn 1000 and earlier you had 5000 as balance in your saving account, now the balance would be shown as 5000 minus 1000 is equal to 4000. So this updation is happening at the user end, please understand. So this entry and updation happens as the user end. It is not the database administrator or the application programmer who are actually making changes to the data in the database. And what is the other job of the end user? What do the end users do? They actually access the database through the application programs. Yesterday I talked about Finacle, I hope you remember. Now that was an application program. So the database, the banking database would be created and maintained. And in what sense maintain means? Maintain means they would ensure that the database is up and running, there are no problems. So in that sense it would be maintained by the database administrator. Then there would be application programmers. In case of Finacle, which is a product of Infosys, some application programmers must have designed this Finacle application, and now these are the end users, the clerks, the cashiers, the loan managers and the other employees in the bank branch who are making use of this application to, on a regular and continuous basis, keep entering data and keep updating data. Just like I said, that in case you are withdrawing 1000, so they will key in this data, they will enter this data, and then naturally there would be a modification in data and the balance that would be shown would be much less now, because 1000 you have already withdrawn. Is this okay? So these are the three entities who can be said to be the users of database system. Now one more thing which you have to keep in your mind, please understand, whenever the database administrator is designing the system, whenever the application programmers are designing the application, ideally they should be talking to the end users, because after all, whatever they are doing, it be it the database, be it the application, it has to be used by the end user only. So you have to take them into the loop. You have to ask them for their suggestion, ask them for the problems that they have been facing. Try to come up with a database or try to come up with an application program which satisfies the requirement of the end user. So in that sense, as I said, end users are very, very important as far as the different segments of users of database systems are concerned, right? Okay, then now we are ending this discussion, and we'll be following up on the various database architectures, database models that we have in the forthcoming session. Thank you very much.